Somewhere in Stockholm, 5 boys, around 11 years old, a schoolyard, a ping pong table. One boy is lying on the table. Another is simulating sex with him. The others are watching, laughing. My friend saw this on her morning run. She couldn't stop thinking about it. Neither could I. Because those boys weren't being bad. They were being taught by something none of us choose to let into that schoolyard. This episode is about that. Not about porn, not about shame, not about blame. It's about what happens when sexuality enters the human system before the human system is ready to hold it, and what we, as adults, can do about it. This is not an anti-porn episode. I'm not against porn. Like most people, I watched it myself. Sexuality is part of being human. It has always been. It's not new. It's not unnatural. But something has changed. Not sexuality itself, but how, when, and what age we encounter it. Welcome to 34O, the podcast where we explore intimacy, relationships, and what makes us human. What I'm sharing here today is not the final word. These are reflections on research, on conversations, and on a question I keep coming back to. Take what resonates, leave what doesn't. Today, research suggests that many children are first exposed to pornography somewhere between the age of 11 and 13. And often they're not even looking for it. They stumble into it through a link, a friend, an algorithm. So this episode is not about porn, it's about what happens when sexuality enters the human system before this human system is ready to hold it. Porn is not new, but unlimited, high-speed, algorithm-driven porn, that is new. Sex, desire, fantasy, that's always been part of being human. And for many adults, porn can exist in a neutral space, sometimes even on a positive one. It can be curiosity, exploration, fantasy. In some relationships, it can even be something you talk about. I've had relationships like that, where it created conversation, not distance. But that requires something: emotional maturity, safety, the ability to separate fantasy from reality. And that's really the line we're exploring here. If we look at this through the lens of neuroscience, something interesting appears. The brain's reward system, the same system involved in things like gambling or addiction, is strongly activated by sexual stimuli. Dopamine. The signal that says, this matters, come back to this. Now, that in itself is not the problem. The important part is timing. Because a teenage brain is still developing. The system that seeks reward develops earlier than the system responsible for control and regulation. So you have a brain that says, this feels good, more of this, before it fully understands consequences. And when high-intensity sexual content enters the systems early, it leaves an imprint. Not in a dramatic or sensational way, but enough to shape patterns. And that's really the key word here: patterns. Research suggests that early exposure can influence how we form expectations around sex and relationships. Not because people are weak, not because something is wrong, but because the brain is learning. It's building scripts about what sex looks like, about what is expected. and how women and men relate. And slowly, almost invisibly, those scripts begin to shape how we show up with each other. And this is where it becomes less about research and more about something human. Because porn doesn't teach intimacy, it teaches performance. It teaches what something looks like, not what it feels like. It teaches speed, not presence. And if your first experience of sexuality is through a screen, you don't learn connection, you learn consumption. You learn that sexuality is something you watch, something you perform, something you achieve, not something you feel, not something you co-create. And over time, that matters. Because intimacy lives somewhere else, in slowness, in uncertainty, in presence. And if your nervous system becomes used to high stimulation, real connection can feel quiet, too quiet. I talked about this in a previous episode, Beyond the Algorithm, but it keeps coming back to me. Because those boys weren't being bad, they were imitating. And imitation without understanding, that's not sexuality. That's a script without a story. And there's another layer to this that matters. Children are curious. They explore. That's not new. And it's not wrong. Curiosity about the body, about closeness, about sexuality, that's part of development. The problem is not that children are curious. The problem is what they are exposed to, and whether there is an adult there to help them understand it. Because when something happens, our response matters. If the response is shame, don't do that, that's wrong, that's disgusting, then curiosity doesn't disappear, it just goes underground. But if the response is curiosity, what made you do that? What did you feel? Where did you see that? Something else happens. Then we create space for understanding. Because children don't need silence, they need context. They need someone who can help them make sense of what they're experiencing without making them feel wrong for being curious. Curiosity is not the problem. Exposure without guidance is. And when you combine curiosity with unlimited, unfiltered exposure, but no conversation, that's where confusion begins. And this is where the conversation often becomes polarized. Some people say ban it, others say normalize everything, but neither really addresses the core issue. I've spent quite a lot of time in Berlin. It's a city with a different relationship to sexuality. It's a very sex-positive environment, more open, less ashamed. And there's something valuable in that. I live in Sweden, and here there's more regulation, more protection, and there's something valuable in that too. These are different perspectives, different ways of holding the same question. But neither answers the deepest part of it. Because the real issue is not porn itself. It's not openness or restriction. It's timing, context, and whether there is an adult present to help a child make sense of what they're saying. If we zoom out, this is part of something bigger. Sexuality used to be discovered in relationship, slowly, awkwardly, humanly. Today, it's often discovered in isolation, through a screen, driven by algorithms, optimized for stimulation. We didn't just digitize sex, we removed it from the human context as it meant to exist in. And when you remove something from its context, you change its meaning. So this is not about shame. It's not about saying porn is bad. It's about asking a different question. Not what is this, but when does it enter the system? Because porn becomes a problem when it replaces experience instead of complementing it. And what we might be seeing today is not a generation that is more sexually free, but a generation that is more sexually exposed, without being more emotionally equipped. And exposure without maturity doesn't create freedom, it creates confusion. And maybe that's where the real conversation begins. Not around control, not around judgment, but around awareness, presence, and what it actually means to grow intimacy as a human being. Because the opposite of shame is not freedom, it's understanding. Maybe the most important thing isn't what we say to our children about this. It's whether we're awake enough to say anything at all. Whether we're present enough to notice. Whether we care enough to have the conversation, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable. Because children don't need perfect adults. They need present adults. And that starts with us waking up to what's happening, to what our children are navigating, to the conversations we keep postponing because we don't know how to begin. Begin anyway. If this episode made you think or uncomfortable, I'd love to hear it. Leave a comment, send me a message, tell me what landed, what you're still sitting with, or what you wish someone had talked about when you were growing up. If you're a parent, a teacher, or someone who works with young people, I especially want to hear from you. What are you seeing? What do you need more of? If you haven't followed the podcast yet, please do it now. And if this felt like something someone in your life needs to hear, please share it. This conversation matters, and it grows every time someone passes it on. Stay honest, stay present, and stay human.